You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. All right, folks, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals agrees to review a heavily argued illegal voting conviction. Crystal Mason faces 5 years in prison for casting a provisional ballot in the 2016 election. Now, at the time, she was on supervised release for a federal conviction and did not see her name on the voter roll. Mason submitted a provisional ballot at the advice of a poll worker, not knowing she was ineligible to vote. Now, although Mason has claimed she unknowingly voted illegally, prosecutors convicted her of a second-degree state felony. Now, keep in mind, this case is similar to Hervis Rogers, who was arrested and charged last week in Texas with 2 counts of illegal voting. Rogers cast ballots while on parole. He said he also wasn't aware. Now, attorney generals from Connecticut, New York, Illinois, Massachusetts, Nevada, Oregon, and the District of Columbia released a joint statement regarding Rogers' arrest. Now, this is what they say: the unwarranted criminalization of Hervis Rogers' error is a grave miscarriage of justice. By casting his ballot in the 2020 primary, Hervis Rogers was simply attempting to fulfill his civic duty. Now he's potentially facing decades in prison. The prosecution is a clear attempt to intimidate voters, deter participation, and stoke fears of fictitious voter fraud. Texas is disguising voter suppression as election security and disenfranchising millions in the process. The voting system needs reform, not restrictions, and we stand with all the champions of justice in Texas, including the state's House Democrats, in fighting for fair and accessible elections. We will continue to do everything in our power to protect and expand voting rights throughout the nation. Now, Crystal Mason, her attorney, Kim Cole, join us right now. I'm glad to have both of you back on the show. So what's the status of the case, Kim? Where does this stand right now?
So obviously, as you mentioned previously, Crystal's appeal has been filed with the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. The state has filed their response to our appeal, and we are currently finalizing our reply to their response. And as soon as that is in, then it's in the court's hands. They will review it and they will make a decision as to whether or not Crystal will have to serve 5 years in prison, or they will send it back to the lower court. They can reverse it, they can uphold it.
So for folks, again, who are unfamiliar with the case, just walk people through what happened, because 2 things were going on. First of all, Crystal was previously in prison on the federal level, but this is a state issue. And so explain to folks so they understand what's going on here.
Okay, so Crystal was, she pled guilty to a federal charge related to her tax preparation business. So she pled guilty to that charge, the federal charge, and served out her sentence. She was sentenced to 5 years. She served out that sentence. And then she got out and thought she was performing her civic duty and went to vote. However, apparently her name was not on the voter registration rolls, and they ended up charging her. And actually, she didn't actually vote. She filled out a provisional ballot because her name was not on the list of registered voters there at her normal polling place. So she filled out a provisional ballot, went on about her business. A few months later, she was arrested for illegally voting. And no one there at the polling place, no one in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, no one advised her that she was not eligible to vote. She was on supervised release from her federal sentence, and so she had served all of her prison time. However, she had a period of 3 years of supervised release, and she was still on that within that 3-year period. And no one ever told her that that would render her ineligible to vote. So she had no clue that she couldn't vote the day that she cast her provisional ballot. And she was tried, convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. As a result of that, they violated her federal sentence and sent her back to prison for an additional 10 months and also added some additional time of supervised release to her sentence. So she has already done time for this particular, for voting. And that's on the federal side.
Crystal, the amount of time, money, and resources that Texas is expending on this is ridiculous. At your trial, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't your parole officer say you weren't told you couldn't vote?
The supervised release officer, my supervised release officer supervisor testified on the stand that no, we never told her she couldn't vote. No, she never signed anything. There was no paperwork in place, and yet I was still found guilty of illegally voting and sentenced to 5 years.
So no one told you, but you're supposed to just somehow know just because?
Correct. So how do I know I'm doing something wrong if I was never informed?
Do you believe that Texas is trying to make an example out of you in order to intimidate others?
Definitely. And when they sent me back to prison right before, I think it was an election going on in September, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing.
This is...
Roland.
Yeah, Kim, go ahead.
They even said in her trial, the district attorney even said, Your Honor, let's send a message and please sentence her to a stern prison sentence, to send a message. So yes, they're trying to make an example out of her. They don't want people that look like Crystal to vote, period.
This is, it's just incredible. Also, Crystal, when you look at other cases where people mistakenly voted and they were like, okay, you know what? They were let off real easy, but they happen not to look like you.
Yes, I see that all the time. I think I just seen one today where you go to the Capitol, you commit a crime, and they give you 8 months in federal prison, and yet the act that you committed was so outrageous. And here I am, didn't even vote, but I'm charged with illegally voting. And I'm fighting. I've been fighting for 4.5 years, waking up every day, not knowing if I'm going back to prison over illegally voting, and I never voted.
This is, it's just incredible that this thing is still ongoing, and it just makes no sense. Any idea, Kim, when the Court of Appeals is going to issue their ruling?
None whatsoever. It took them several months to even agree to a discretionary review of her case. So it could be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. It just depends on the court and when they decide to make their ruling. And so we have no clue, but as soon as we file our reply, which we will file this week, it's in their hands, and they will make the determination as to whether or not this 5-year prison sentence will be upheld.
Man, just unbelievable. Crystal, you're sort of left in limbo because, before, you were getting your life together, you were trying to live, and all of a sudden it got upended. You went back to prison. Now you're out. Now you may go back. That has to be nerve-wracking.
Roland, it is. But what I did is I started an organization, Crystal Mason, to fight against voter suppression. So what I do now is I go out and I encourage people on how important it is to vote and try to educate them if they're eligible to vote now. And what I said was I'm going to keep moving forward, trusting God that things are going to work out in my favor, and I'm going to keep living and just trusting God through this process. And I met Hervis, and this is a 62-year-old man that been on parole for a very long time and was giving a voter's registration card. And this man did not mean to do anything wrong. He cried like a baby. Like, I can't believe that I'm in this position, and this is just so heartbreaking because it reminds me of when I first started this journey. So I'm just glad that he has support, and I just pray that everything works out in his favor as well.
All right, then. Any final words, Kim?
Certainly, Roland, this Crystal's conviction, the new charges against Mr. Hervis Rogers, all of this new legislation that's been presented is all clearly efforts to intimidate voters, to suppress votes. They don't want people who look like Crystal, people who look like Hervis, people who look like me and you. They don't want us to vote. And that's what all of this is about, not just in Texas, but all across the country. And that's why I am very proud of the Texas Democrats for standing up and holding up this egregious supposedly voter integrity, which essentially is voter suppression laws that they are trying to pass here in Texas. We have got to stand behind them. We've got to stand behind Crystal. We've got to stand behind Hervis Rogers, because they are actually trying to send a 62-year-old man to prison for up to 20 years, which could essentially be a death sentence for him. So we've got to stand behind them and get these egregious charges dropped against him, as well as overturn Crystal's conviction.
All right, then. And also, I think before there was a GoFundMe. Is that for Crystal? Is that still active?
Yes, it's Justice, the number 4, Crystal Mason.
Justice, the number 4, Crystal Mason. All right, folks, be sure to pop that into GoFundMe. Kim, Crystal, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roland.
Folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Racial injustice is a scourge on this nation, and the Black community has felt it for generations. We have an obligation to do something about it. Whether it's canceling student debt, increasing the minimum wage, or investing in Black-owned businesses, the Black community deserves so much better. I'm Nina Turner, and I'm running for Congress to do something about it.